Hi there, I'm Mistel Godlewski, an American girl who called the cornfields of Illinois home until over 10 years ago when I started navigating the chaos of life overseas. If you've ever felt that itch for something more, that whisper telling you to break free from the ordinary, you're in the right place. This podcast is your backstage pass to the wild ride of moving abroad. I'm here to pull back the curtain on the real journey, sharing stories that are funny, dramatic, and sometimes downright unbelievable. We'll explore the gritty details, from battling culture shock and navigating tricky visa processes to celebrating those small victories that make it all worth it. So whether you're daydreaming about a new life abroad or already in the thick of it, grab your passport and let's explore what it really means to live life beyond borders. Welcome to Abroadly Speaking. Hey there, friend. Welcome to the Abroadly Speaking podcast. My name is Mistel. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. And for some of you have been asking me recently about our move abroad story and how much it cost and how did we do it and all these good things. But in order to tell you our move abroad story in the most meaningful way, and if you've heard it before, you're welcome to skip this episode, but I'm sure there'll be nuggets you didn't know in this one. I wanted to make sure to give you kind of the full context of how moving abroad has looked for me, because it looks different in different points in my life. So I started moving abroad actually at birth. My parents were stationed with the US military in northern Germany. And my brother and I, my older brother and I were both born there before my parents relocated back to the States. I was born exactly on the day my dad was scheduled to leave and move to Kentucky. And apparently, I just delayed the move by about 6 weeks, which I'm sure the military absolutely loved. But with that came a resident permit and a proof of birth abroad and a whole lot of complications with being born in a German hospital because the American military hospital hadn't been built yet. So I was literally born abroad. And then fast forward 4 years later, we lived back in Germany from ages 4 to 9. In the 1980s, when we lived there, my parents decided to allow us to live off base. So we did not live in military housing, in what would be called DOD housing at the time. We actually lived in a German community with a family. We lived in a flat on their second floor of their house. Absolutely loved it. It was beautiful. It was a great experience. The tr- the truth is, I didn't learn great German. I spoke children's German with the neighbor's daughter who was between my brother and my age. But ultimately, I went to American schools. I went to DoD schools in Germany. So I didn't have German exposure to the point of being fluent when we left when I was at the end of grade 3. So we were there basically from kindergarten to grade 3 for me, but I didn't really have a powerful language of German. I basically had kids playing outside German and a little bit in school, but that was it. When we moved back to the US, it was basically the last time we were going to move abroad. My dad retired from the military in the early 90s after his last stint. We spent about 5 years outside of St. Louis, Missouri, and my parents retired there because they were tired of moving around, number one. Number two, my dad was going to get relocated someplace that the family couldn't come along. My brother was finishing high school. I was going to start high school. It was just not a good time to move. So we thought, we're here. And that was it. That was the life. That was living abroad. And eventually, a few years and a couple of moves later, my husband and I got married and we were living in North Carolina. And if you don't know this, I got super sick in North Carolina. I ended up with breast cancer. I had to go through chemo and radiation and all kinds of surgeries and things to get healthy. And during that time, my husband and I were really sitting down and chatting with one another about what we wanted from life and what we would dream of from life. I was working for a company that was based in Belgium from North Carolina. So I was going to be traveling more and more across borders, and the opportunity to travel was always fun for me. I loved living in a world where I could travel, but with chemo and radiation, I was really super limited. Well, after that, you realize that your life is not guaranteed, right? You find out you literally have a disease that can take your life away, and you really learn very quickly, oh, this is not how I want to live my life. So my husband and I started looking for opportunities to move abroad. I was traveling excessively to Belgium, literally at least once a month for 5 to 10 days a month. My husband was left at home with our two cats or traveling on his own to wherever he was going for his job. And we were just kind of two ships passing in the night a lot of the time and daydreaming about a time where we could actually live on the same continent that we worked in. And eventually, my husband got a job offer for the company that he was working for in North Carolina at the time. He got a job offer to relocate to Switzerland. This was September of 2013. We had just moved into our brand new, like literally newly built brand new apartment in June of 2013. And then September of 2013, we get this notification, "Hey, how do you feel about moving to Switzerland?" And we both were like, this is probably the worst time. We had just bought a car. I was still going through cancer treatment because we were still following up with all of it. And we looked at each other and said, well, I guess it's now or never. Neither one of us had ever even been to Switzerland before for more than an overnight. I had gone earlier in the year to visit for a day. I was in and out. I stayed one night in Switzerland in my entire life in that time. We got on a plane in December and moved, and that was pretty much it. We did arrange a pre-visit, so we had an opportunity to visit for 2 days together before we got on the plane to move permanently 2 weeks later, but it was this insane situation. The truth is we had $2,000 in the bank when we moved, and we sold his car to cover my car, because my car was brand new and we hadn't paid off enough of the loan yet. So we sold his car to cover the cost that we were upside down on my car that we sold. We had a relocation package that was included with the company relocation that included the movement of our cats and the movement of our stuff. And that was basically all that it covered, right? Those were the two things. And it helped us cover eventually the first 3 months, like the deposit for our apartment, but I'll kind of talk about that as we go through. So essentially, we had to pay for everything that wasn't moving our stuff, the visas, moving our cats, or the rent, the down payment on our apartment. Everything else was up to us to cover, and we had $2,000 to cover it. We arrived in Switzerland 2 days after Christmas of 2013 and showed up to find out that we needed 3 months of rent for our apartment. Now, mind you, this is the deposit that we need in order to secure our apartment that we're going to be moving into in February. Holy shnikes, 3 months of rent when you're paying at least $2,000 a month of rent is not a small amount of money. And so we ended up, because you don't get the relocation fund until your first paycheck. And your first paycheck doesn't come for a month until after you start working. And we didn't start working until January 1st. So essentially, we weren't going to get that relocation money that we had to pay for the first 3 months of rent until the end of January. So we had to borrow money from an uncle of ours to ask and be able to afford the down payment to secure our apartment. And then we repaid him at the end of the month when we got our first paychecks to be able to fund that relocation. Otherwise, everything else came out of pocket. So that meant our first health insurance coverage. And in Switzerland, we do not have universal health care. We have mandatory health insurance. We have what the Affordable Care Act is meant to be here in Switzerland, where we have mandatory health insurance coverage. We had to pay for that. Then we also had to pay for transportation. So we got what they call Jahreskarte, which are year-long transportation cards that allowed us to use public transportation in the city, which was great. We also had what they call half fare cards, where essentially you get a reduced, it's not really half, it just pretends to be half. You get a reduced fare on train tickets outside of the city, and that cost us money. We had to put a down payment on our electric and cable and all that kind of stuff. We had to get new cell phones. We couldn't use our American cell phones in Switzerland at the time. This is 2013. It's pre-iPhone, so you're not using an iPhone at that point. So we needed to put money down on a cell phone. So if you can imagine, $2,000 lasted about 27 minutes when we got there. And Switzerland is probably about 20 to 30% more expensive than what is average in the United States. It's more like living in New York City than like living in Dallas, Texas, for example. It's a very expensive country. And so that $2,000 also needed to last groceries, food, anything we wanted to eat out, everything that we needed to pay for the first basically 6 weeks of our life in Switzerland needed to come out of that $2,000. And let me tell you, we made it work. We were able to do that. The only thing we borrowed money for was the down payment, which, like I said, we paid right back. We were fortunate because with that $2,000, we did not have to pay for relocating our stuff or our cats. We did have to pay for everything else, though. So I just want to put that in perspective. If you are planning on moving your stuff, if you're planning on moving animals, $2,000 is probably not going to work for you. You would need more than that to be able to live on. Keeping in mind also that your first paycheck, usually in Europe, especially, I don't know about every other country, but I know within the European Union that I have experienced, you get paid at the end of the month and you only get paid once a month. So we get paid right now on the 25th of every month for the work that we've done for the month before. So from January 1st to January 25th, we had no income, right? In the US, we're used to every 2 weeks. We're used to essentially getting paid right away. And nope, didn't happen. Yikes. We were able in that first year, my salary, my job came with us. So I didn't really get a salary adjustment other than cost of living adjustment. Everything else remained exactly the same. The only thing that changed essentially was they allowed for the fact that it cost more to live in Switzerland than it did to live in North Carolina. I got about I think a 12% pay raise, which didn't even cover the cost of living difference, honestly, but that's what they called it. So ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, we did not have a lot of money when we moved. By the end of the first year, we had paid off about, I think it was $8,000 or $9,000 worth of credit card debt that I had because we were able to live more frugally on our life abroad. We were able to make decisions differently. We lived in a 90 square meter, which is about 1,000 square foot apartment. We didn't have new stuff. We didn't have, we had to get rid of stuff. We sold some stuff. We were able to move away from some of our stuff simply because the shoebox size apartment that we moved into compared to what we had in the States definitely made a big difference overall. From there in 2017, I had a baby. I was off of work, but I had maternity leave that covered us during that period. I had a baby in July of 2017, and come around September again, for some reason or another, my husband got another job offer to this time to move us to Vienna, Austria. We took that opportunity as well. That time, it's of course a lot cheaper to move because we no longer needed to move with international overseas type stuff. We did have to move our stuff, or we decided to move our stuff in that case. But we got rid of a bunch of things before we moved. We realized that our new apartment in Vienna would not necessarily need the American size furniture we'd been living with for the last 5 years or 4 years. So we sold, I think we sold our bed, we sold our couches, we got rid of a desk, we gave away a bunch of things as well. So our total move cost was lower because, of course, we weren't crossing international waters to get there. We didn't have to ship things across a ship. It was on a truck, and so therefore a lot cheaper. Again, we had a relocation package that helped us. We did not get rent money this time. We only were able to receive the cost of moving our goods, and they supported us with visas. To be perfectly honest, that relocation was a shit show. It was absolutely, the company got shafted on whatever they paid for because we ended up having to do the majority of it ourselves. I had to get all of our documents ourselves. We paid for all of the legalization fees that we needed. We paid for all of the relevant documentation that we needed to get from the United States and from Europe. So, for example, I needed my birth certificate from Germany. We needed my daughter's birth certificate from Switzerland and my husband's from the US. They all had to be apostilled. They all had to have all this stuff. And we ended up paying out of pocket for that. In total, for that move, we paid, I think, around $1,200 out of pocket. Again, not including the cost of the moving truck because that was paid for by the company. The cost of down payment for our rental flat in Austria was only 1 month's rent, so we didn't have to pay 3 months' rent that time. That certainly helped. And we used the refund from our Swiss rent to pay for our Austrian down payment. So that worked out well for us. So the cost of relocation within Europe was only about $1,200 minus the cost of the truck. The cost of the truck, like I said, was covered by the company. Third time's a charm. We moved back to Switzerland during the pandemic, during the second shutdown of 2020 from Austria. Again, same situation. We paid for the cost of the visa paperwork. They paid for the moving truck, so we didn't have to have that cost covered. Everything else, though, was on us. In that move, the cost was around, I think, $800 equivalent. Again, we didn't have to have all the same documentation, which was kind of nice because we had already supplied our birth certificates, our marriage license, et cetera, et cetera. That was already on file in Switzerland. So we didn't have to refile all that documentation. They already had it. The only thing we had to do was refile for our visas. And then, of course, we had our transportation costs that we decided to do. In that case, we had bought a car while we were in Austria, so we had to import the car. So we had to pay import fees for that. Ultimately, that wasn't super expensive because the car was more than 6 months old, so we didn't have to pay full tax on the car. Had it been less than 6 months old, we would have had to pay taxes again. That is where the majority of the 800 francs went to, is honestly to move in the car, and then the small amount for the application fees for our visas. The reality is, if you're not moving your stuff, you can really survive on about $2,000 for your move abroad for two people. The more people that you have moving, of course, the more the cost will be, but it's completely legitimately reasonable to move abroad on $5,000 for a family of four. That does not include moving your stuff. That does include flying on for example, flying on a Tuesday and on a non-business class seat. You're going to fly economy. You're going to pack 2 suitcases for each family member, and that's how you move your stuff because most of the international flights allow for 2 checked bags. That's what you move on, and $5,000 will go more than enough for you for the first month or 2 of your move, plus the moving costs. Now, if you need to put 3 months of down payment on an apartment, and actually would do that, then of course you would need more depending on what your rent will be. That being said, most of the places that require 3 months of rental payment up front also have what they call deposit insurance. So what we didn't know at the time, and we would do differently today if we not known, or had we known, I should say, we would have used deposit insurance to pay for our deposit. So instead of paying $6,000 up front, which is a lot of money when you only have 2,000 in the bank, what we would have done is paid a monthly fee to cover that deposit. And essentially what that does is we never end up paying the full 6,000 unless we have not accumulated that much by the time we leave the apartment, and also we cause that much damage. In the end, we caused, I think, 1,000 francs worth of damage. So around $1,100 at the time worth of damage, because we broke part of the cabinet and they had to replace that whole cabinet fixture. Don't ask. Accidents happen. That's why we have to pay down payments. But they were able to then refund us the rest of our deposit for an apartment. So we could have used the deposit insurance. They would have paid the $1,000 and we would have been done. Now, that being said, we wouldn't have gotten any money back had we used deposit insurance because that's what we're paying it for. But ultimately, it would have been a lot cheaper. We would not have had to put that much money up front. We would have been in a lot better position, and we wouldn't have even borrowed the money from my uncle in the long run. All right. So that's my move abroad story. I just wanted to give it to you in reality because a lot of people have asked how in the hell would you possibly move your shit abroad for less than $2,000? The truth is we had help to move our stuff. We had help to move our cats, but everything else really and truly was on us to do it. Our first deposit, let's say our first deposit for our rental, we borrowed money. We could have avoided that, and then we would have been $6,000 richer in the long run. But in the end of the first year abroad, we really were able to pay off a considerable amount of debt that we had from the US just because we were able to live more frugally. We were able to see where our money was going. We weren't spending money every time we went to the doctor. I still had all my health checkups from Switzerland, but I wasn't paying out of pocket $7,000 a year, which was my deductible in the US. I was paying far, far, far less than that. In total, I wasn't getting money taken out of my paycheck every month for health insurance. We were paying that directly, about the same cost. But in the end, we were saving a ton of money by moving abroad. Our rent was more expensive in Switzerland than it was in the US, but everything else ended up being much cheaper. We didn't have a car payment. We didn't have car insurance. We didn't have gas because we relied exclusively on public transportation. Our health insurance costs ultimately were about even, but when you take the hospital costs, the out of pockets that I was paying every month, the deductibles I was paying every month, I had a $300 deductible in Switzerland. So once I met 300, I didn't have to pay anything more. Where in the US, I had a $7,000 out-of-pocket maximum plus my $2,500 deductible. So in total, we were paying about 10 grand a year for me to be healthy. Thank God we were able to afford that. But ultimately, that's where a lot of the money came in, where we were able to save in Switzerland that we weren't able to use in the US. All right, my friend, that's it for this episode. I hope this was helpful. I know this is a lot of information and a lot of numbers and shit being thrown around, but I just want to give you the real, authentic, how did we do it story so that you're not listening and thinking, it's not possible. It is absolutely possible. $5,000 if you don't want to move all your stuff with you is absolutely possible. Yes, you'll need a little bit then probably for furniture. You don't have to get it all right away. You can live with a few beds for the first few weeks. And then as you start making money, you can start accumulating more stuff that actually fits in your apartment instead of the shit that's going to be too big. All right, my friend, I will see you on the next episode. Let me know if this was helpful. I would love to hear what else you want to know about my move abroad or about moves abroad in general, and I would be happy to share. All right, I'll see you on the next one. Bye, friend. Thanks for tuning in to Broadly Speaking. If today's episode got you dreaming a little bigger or thinking a little braver, go ahead and hit subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who's ready for their own adventure. And hey, don't be a stranger. Come hang out with me over on Instagram at @IamMestelle for the real, unfiltered life abroad. Keep that passport handy, and remember, life's too short to stay in one place.